If they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, they should know in the Kremlin that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia.
Russia is preparing to retire its only aircraft carrier, Admiral Kuznetsov, effectively shutting down its fixed-wing carrier aviation and raising doubts about whether Moscow can still claim blue water naval power status. Admiral Kuznetsov, a 58,000-ton Project 1-143.5 aircraft-carrying cruiser launched in the late Soviet era, has been plagued by mishaps throughout its life. Defense media outlet Army Recognition reported on September 18th. The ship's latest refit became a saga of dock accidents, onboard fires, and endless delays. Its aging propulsion system, 8 boilers feeding 4 turbines, has long been maintenance-heavy, and sanctions have further complicated access to spare parts. With resources consumed by the war in Ukraine, the Kremlin appears ready to cut its losses. Unlike Western carriers, Kuznetsov was built with a heavy weapons load, P-700 Granite anti-ship missiles, Kinjal SAMs, and Kashtan close-in defenses, while relying on a ski-jump stow-bar deck instead of catapults, Army Recognition wrote. That layout capped the launch weight of its Su-33 and MiG-29K fighters and prevented the operation of heavier aircraft like fixed-wing early warning planes. Instead, Russia depended on Ka-31 helicopters for radar coverage, a solution far inferior to the E-2 Hawkeye or similar platforms used by NATO navies. With Kuznetsov sidelined, Russia's carrier-capable fighters become land-based squadrons. While still combat-ready, they lose the at-sea launch and recovery cycles that keep pilots trained for carrier operations. According to Army Recognition, simulators and shore facilities can only do so much, without deck time in real conditions. Carrier aviation skills inevitably atrophy. For years, Russian design bureaus have floated paper projects like the nuclear-powered Project 23,000, E-Storm, and the conventional Lamentin. On paper, they rival Western supercarriers with catapults and air wings of 70 to 90 aircraft. But there is no steel cut, no yard slot, no supply chain, and no funding. With Moscow prioritizing missiles, drones, submarines, and artillery for the war in Ukraine, a new carrier remains hypothetical at best, Army Recognition notes. Carriers allow fleets to project power beyond the reach of coastal aviation, extend air defense screens, and complicate enemy targeting. Even with its limitations, Kuznetsov gave Russia a presence at sea, with fighters and helicopters able to push back maritime patrol aircraft and widen anti-submarine coverage. Without it, the Northern and Pacific fleets must lean more heavily on land-based aircraft, slower to arrive, dependent on tankers, and less credible as a global show of force. The decision to retire Kuznetsov reflects a shift in Russian naval priorities. Sanctions, a war-driven economy, and the drain of Ukraine combat operations mean Moscow is doubling down on cheaper, more immediately useful systems: submarines, cruise missiles, drones, and air defenses. Retiring the carrier is less about engineering failure and more about allocating scarce resources. Globally, carriers remain the yardstick of great power status, Army Recognition wrote. The US, China, UK, France, India, Italy, and Japan all field them because they tie together strike, air defense, and diplomacy at sea. Russia will remain a threat with its missile and submarine forces. But without a functioning carrier, it will no longer be viewed by peers as a full-spectrum blue-water navy. Earlier, reports emerged that Russia faced renewed debate over the future of one of its largest surface combatants, the nuclear-powered battlecruiser Pyotr Veliky, amid growing concerns about the cost-effectiveness of maintaining such legacy platforms. Former Pacific Fleet Commander Admiral Sergei Avakians stated in an interview with Izvestia that funding a refit of the vessel would be an inefficient use of state resources. Russian soldiers and volunteers bringing humanitarian aid are being systematically robbed at military checkpoints, according to Russian war bloggers. The culprits are the infamously corrupt military police, who confiscate equipment for their own use or to resell. Reserve Pioneer writes of the situation at the checkpoints between Crimea and the occupied southern part of the Kherson region. There are a lot of checkpoints on the Kherson border toward the Spits, immediately after crossing the border. Deep in the rear, more than 200 kilometers from the line of contact, there are military police, military commandant's offices, or riot police. Usually these guys, who aren't actually involved in active combat, are incredibly motivated and equipped like gods of war. Not every Special Forces unit is so well equipped. But I think now I understand where they get all this. Friends, do you think they need Mavics 200 kilometers from the front line? No. But at the Sokil checkpoint, they decided they needed them more than the guys on the Kherson Islands, and they started telling me that transporting birds was prohibited, supposedly because it was an order from some commander. Of course, they could only take them from me over my dead body, because I know exactly who these Mavics were going to. But the valiant warriors from the military police and the military commandant's office didn't care. They started demanding some kind of transport documents and so on. These comrades are supposed to catch 500s, deserters, and stop sabotage and reconnaissance groups, but they're ripping off volunteers. The point is, we ended up buying them off with nets and blankets, any of which could save the lives of the guys on the front lines. But these guys are apparently more needed. Thank God there weren't many of these warriors of light, just 3 posts. Once we approached the front line, I never saw such crap again. Where the guys were stationed, not equipped like ultra soldiers, tired and risking their lives. We always pass through there without any difficulties. The guys understand where this humanitarian aid is going. And okay, if it were my first time there, I might have thought it was normal. But no, we go there regularly. And the funniest thing is, on the way back, they told me I wasn't allowed to go across the border at all. Apparently, humanitarian aid requires accompanying documents from the regional administration, and I have to provide them with a list. Incidentally, this is the only post that's aware of such innovations. I've never heard such nonsense. Are the soldiers at the checkpoints feeling impunity in their 4th year? Vladimir Romanov comments that the rear military police posts in Kherson Oblast, the 3 closest to Jankoy, are the most run down in the entire northern military district. They constantly try to pressure volunteers in order to jack them up and profit. Meanwhile, other posts, closer to the front lines, are more understanding about who is delivering all this stuff and why. Looking at the bigger picture, Freelance observes that there are 2 types of fighters. Those who fight on the front lines, beating up the Ukrainians every day, and thanks to whom our citizens can sleep peacefully. Real warriors. They lack equipment, ammunition, food, and many other issues that we are trying to address. Guys standing in equipment worth millions, in areas where there is no war. Yes, maybe FPV drones will fly there. But forgive me, this is not the front line. These guys, the so-called Rexes, wearing such good equipment, stand in the rear areas, where there is no work except for inspecting cars. They don't need Mavics, camouflage nets, and everything else that the men on the front line so desperately need. They are primarily fighting enemy sabotage groups and 500s. That is their main task. But for some reason, humanitarian aid has also become a target for them to profit from. This is a very acute issue that really needs to be raised. How can we win the war if we have such idiots in the rear? It's sad. Russian soldiers thought they are invisible. The Russian tactic of using cloaks to hide from Ukrainian night vision drones has proven completely ineffective, as operators continue to detect and strike targets with precision, despite these desperate measures. The moment a Russian drone is shot down over Kiev, Zelensky warned that if Russia threatens blackouts in Kiev, Moscow will face one of its own. He also revealed that Ukraine has given Trump a $90 billion weapons list, but is open to separate deals, including Tomahawks.
Kolomoisky, Russia must clearly know that civilized countries differ from wild ones in that they never start first and are not aggressors. But that does not mean they are weak. And there is no need to show weakness if they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine. They should know in the Kremlin that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia. That's briefly about the various points we discussed with the president. There are details of what is happening on our battlefield. There are many different things. There are programs used, for example, by the intelligence of the United States of America, including programs used by our military, Delta, and so on. Let me give you an example. For instance, the Delta program. We see in the program records where the enemy has entered, and it does not say that a sabotage and reconnaissance group has entered, or it does not say that these military forces have entered. And then they were destroyed. It simply marks where they went. And immediately there is a sense of what is occupied and what is not. This is such a war. Unfortunately, people came here, even if there were 3 to 5 people, they were already destroyed by evening.
And in America, at that moment, by evening, they had already shown President Trump that the village in Ukraine was occupied again.
That's how it happens. I just want to explain how it happens. It's absolutely, by the way, it's not only with him, but also with other European leaders and even with us in our society. They see, well, it's colored in such a way that here it's occupied, it's not occupied. There is an enemy presence, it will be destroyed. Yes, and again, our guys will take the appropriate positions. It must be understood that this is not the advantage that the Russians sell to their population and sell abroad as well. No, this is not even a success. These are temporary people. Temporary precisely because their time will definitely end. As soon as the Ukrainian armed forces take the appropriate steps there.
In Kostiantynivka, Russia shelled a residential apartment block, causing destruction and casualties.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.